short and stumbling and breaking God's law. But then I read this article, and they highlighted verse 10, and they talked about the persecutions, the hardships, the difficulties, and they talked about those being the weaknesses. And so I had to rethink everything that I was going to talk about, because I concluded that weakness is not necessarily referring to us being tempted by sin, but rather tested by sin. Hardships could mean financial burdens. It could mean a health battle, an unruly child, a relationship issue, an employment issue. When I think of persecution, I immediately think of Jesus. But people today are persecuted for their religious beliefs. There's plenty of places in this world where you cannot practice Christianity legally. In Somalia, in Iran, Afghanistan, North Korea. Those places, if you get caught, then you might be persecuted and you might be imprisoned or worse. Because to them, you're going against family, you're going against country, you're going against culture. And people can be persecuted for their social beliefs, their sexual tendencies, the way that they dress. I mean, the list goes on. Verse 10 also mentions difficulties. That's pretty broad. I mean, we deal with difficulties every single day. And sometimes they test us more than the hardships and the persecutions because there's so many of them, and they tend to kind of stack up one after the other. And difficulty could be something within your family. It could be a neighbor you're having trouble with. It could be a distance between you and a loved one because of a commitment or a job. It could be an unresolved issue that's been going on for months. And then I thought about putting everything in terms of Jesus and what he dealt with. Because sometimes we forget that he was human. But it's spelled out in the Gospels, and he dealt with hardships and persecution and difficulties. In John chapter 6, the festival of booths or tabernacles was near, and people were complaining that Jesus was preaching in the temple. Plenty of people were astonished by what he was saying and what he had done and helped heal so many people. But there was still plenty of people who didn't quite get on board. When he said he came from heaven and the Lord sent him, they're not buying it. And there were several references that the Jews were looking for several opportunities to kill Jesus. And so he's definitely dealing with persecution and safety. And you kind of feel the tension rising as you continue reading. And throughout Jesus' time on earth, he faces all kinds of hardships. The Pharisees questioning him, dining and talking and teaching, outcasts and sinners. When we struggle with our own weaknesses and faults, we can take solace in the fact that Jesus himself was tempted while on earth. He was tempted in the wilderness, tempted while he was on the cross. I mean, he could have turned the tables. He had saved plenty of people before. He could have saved himself, but his fate was sealed. And he died so that we could be forgiven and we could live a life of grace. And the fact that we're aware of our weaknesses is actually a good thing. It gives us quality of humility. And it makes us closer to God, I think. Because of our weaknesses, we can go to him in prayer. We can be real. We can be honest and expose a rawness about ourselves that maybe we don't do with friends and family. You know, I said a couple weeks ago, there are times when I get to a point where I just simply cry out and beg for help. But in those moments, I know that he's there. I know he's there to embrace me and to lift me up. And he reassures me that my struggles are a stepping stone for something better to come. And there are times when Jesus cried out, when he offered prayers and supplications. So you know that he understands. Earlier in 2 Corinthians, when God is talking to the Apostle Paul, he mentions a thorn. He says, "Therefore, to keep me from being too elated, a thorn was given me in the flesh." Now, we don't know exactly what the thorn is, what kind of form it actually is. But we know what it represents. It represents flaws. And it keeps Paul humble. It prevents him from boasting and thinking too highly of himself. And it reminds him that he needs God and he needs to glorify God and his power. And we need to remember that we have thorns. That we can't do everything on our own. We want to put on this, coat of armor and deflect everything. We want to be able to do everything ourselves. But we have to accept God's help. And sometimes God gives us people to help with those hardships, with those difficult situations. We're going to come across bad people. We are going to experience bad things. And if we know that it's there, then we should try to avoid it. We absolutely should. But we can be reassured that if we have God as a foundation, then we have a firm foundation of hope. And we can be reassured that grace is ours and we are forgiven. I don't know about you, but I'm excited that God uses my weaknesses to make me stronger. God wastes nothing. And it reminds me of how the Japanese have this wonderful art of fixing pottery. It's called kintsugi. Kin means gold. Sugi means to join. So they can literally take a shattered piece of pottery and put it back together with gold. It highlights the weaknesses and the imperfections, and they're not trying to disguise the damage. They're actually saying, look, it's still beautiful. And I think that's a lot like what God does with us and what he does with our brokenness and with our weaknesses. He takes our thorns and he gives us the ability to speak kindly when somebody slanders us. He gives us the ability to be strong when they're trying to knock us down. We are going to suffer traumatic events in our lives, but that doesn't mean that we should give up. It means that we should turn to him for help.